All right. Welcome to Anthro is Fun, a series of 9 classes. This is class 5, the first class under class 5, looking at marriage, kinship, and religion. My name is Victoria Leo. I've got graduate degrees in both anthropology and psychology. My work these days is a little bit of college teaching, which I did a lot of college teaching for many years. But these days, the last 15 years, I've been mostly focusing on being a transformational healer with Soaring Dragon. Okay, SOARING, dragon.biz. And you'll see down at the bottom there, I've got a YouTube channel called Human Bio, the numeral 4, everyone. That's where all the wonderful stuff from my work is kept. So let's get started with the science of humanity, anthropology. All right, so I'm going to remind you that culture and biology have been in an interplay for literally millions of years. When did culture begin? Well, we've had a discussion of what is culture in Anthro is 4, so I'm going to refer you to that. In general, culture is the ways that we create meaning for our lives, and that can include tool use, which does go back millions of years. In fact, I'm an avid crocheter, and there's some evidence that our ancestors were making string bags to carry vegetables at least 500,000 years ago. So crochet is one of the oldest manifestations of culture. So if you were telling yourself, oh, gee, I can't crochet. Yes, you can. Your ancestors were doing it with a very small brain. Okay, when did language begin? Our ancestor Homo erectus had all the larynx structures that would allow articulated speech. And I'm of the opinion that the structures would not have evolved, and because things evolve by accident, natural selection. It would not have become the norm for that species if it weren't being used. So, answer: language 1.5 million years ago. And it's possible that because our brains is that's where language occurs, it's possible that we had a gestural language, meaning grammar and syntax and vocabulary, before we had a verbal language. All right, so one of the keys here that we talked about is that the subsistence pattern that you've got is what is going to drive all these aspects of culture. Talked about that in class number 4. We're going to build it out today. And I've got a funny joke here. It's from a collection of Sidney Harris cartoons. And this indigenous person is talking to the anthropologist and saying, you can't build a hut, you don't know how to find edible roots, and you're really lousy at predicting the weather. In other words, you get a 0 on our IQ test, okay? Which is just a reminder, right, that cultures value different things. Okay, now, how does subsistence drive culture? Remember, subsistence, which is how you get food, right? My subsistence form is a market economy. I do things that are wonderful. People give me money. I take the money down to the grocery store and they give me food. That's how I get food, right? I also have a lovely neighbor and a lovely husband who grow vegetables, and I'm very nice to them, and they give me food. So, okay, subsistence depends on the physical geography, right? If you've got an abundant area, like a river valley, right, or a seashore, and you can get all the food you could possibly need by collecting, that's what you're going to do. You're going to gather, scavenge, and maybe do a little bit of hunting. Most of our ancestors got most of their meat from rabbit snares, which that's not considered hunting by most people. So anyway, if you're living in a dry environment, if the population is increasing and there isn't room for you in the abundant river valley, you have to go live up in the hills. Dry hills are only really good for ranching, pastoralism. If you've read a lot of the holy books from the Middle East, all these individuals were they were herding sheep, they were herding goats, okay, because they were living up in the hills, very poor land. So, and then the other question is, if there's abundance, then you can have a more relaxed approach to life. If you have to work hard and you don't know where your next meal is coming from, then there's a lot of stress in your life. Your health is likely to be less good. You're not likely to live as long. Are small families or large families an advantage? Well, once you get to agriculture, as soon as a child is 3 years old, they start contributing to the family economy. And that was one reason. It wasn't just the lack of birth control. But having a lot of children meant you didn't have to hire farmhands to help you run your farm. Okay, children contributed. They didn't spend all day playing, contrary to popular myth. Kids worked from the time they were 3 years old on the farm. And then the question becomes, what population level can you sustain? Can you allow your population to grow? Do you have to take action to limit population? Remember how our ancestors limited population during the gathering portion. Okay. What is a family? This is the scientific definition. It's a unit of reproductive production. Okay, so a family is a unit within which children are created. It's a unit of economic production. Right? The members of a family are all working towards a common pot that you throw into. And it's a stabilizing force in society. There's a wonderful book called The Immigrant Advantage. And by the way, it has absolutely nothing to do with the whole immigration debate. It's not a political book. It's legal immigrants and what some new ideas that they brought to American culture that the rest of us might want to adopt because they're good ideas. The Immigrant Advantage, and I recommend it. Okay, so kinship, right? What is kin? Kin are people who have obligations to me and I have obligations to them. This is not a reflection of biology. Frequently it is, but you can have kin that you are obligated to and who are obligated to you, who share so few genes with you, they might as well be total strangers. And of course, kinship is created through adoption. In modern culture, it's a relatively uncommon event, But with the very high death rates of our ancestors through time, a lot of people were adopted into families, okay? And then marriage has its own definition. It sometimes has to do with sex and reproduction. It always has to do with economics, sharing resources in some fashion. It is, I said, controlled by the state when you get to a state level, and it frequently gets sacralized. That's not actually a word. Sacralize is the word, but I want to make it clear that it comes from the word sacred. Anyway, and then whatever society you live in defines what your household is, who your kin are, and who you can and can't marry. All right, so let's talk about kinship. There's usually some kind of common biological descent, however remote, right? Except for the adoptees who could actually be 30% of your kinship group. You can also acquire kinship through marriage ties, right? You join your husband's clan or you join your wife's clan, right? And then there are what are known as fictive kin. In some cultures, all the boys who were born in a 2-year period of time are brothers of, and they go through life, including into adulthood and marriage, and they're creating their own families, considering each other brothers, right? So, and this in the U.S., people who were raised in an African culture where they had age sets continue to stay connected via social media, etc. And they do projects together. They'll pay for or physically dig a well or something in their ancestors' village. Soldiers will talk about a band of brothers, right? A band of sisters, the nurses in Vietnam, for example. Monasteries, nunneries, brother, sister, right? The religious kinship, okay? And, in modern industrial societies, Europe, the US, because kinship is less important, we may not be aware of how important this is in other cultures, okay? And I want to explain what scientists are talking about when they're talking about kinship diagrams, okay? So ego, which is a Latin word for me, that's always me, okay? And in this example, I am a man because a triangle is a man. A woman is a circle, okay? So this man, double line means marriage. And if you weren't married but you have a child, there's a separate, it's a single line and then a squiggly line on top of it instead of two solid lines. So this man got married and he had one son, you can see that, who is married and has a daughter. Ego also had a daughter who, actually he had 2 daughters. Okay, you see how that line continued at a right angle there, okay? So ego also has, excuse me, if you go up, ego has a brother who's married and has a green daughter, and ego married, also had a sister who has a child, okay? Now, Ego's parents in that generation, my father had a brother and a sister. My mother had a sister and a deceased brother who was married. And then I've got my wife's family. If you go back to Ego and the double lines, my wife had a sister and a mother. Okay. All right. So all those simple symbols, excuse me, are actually. Let me go back here. There's two different ways of showing an illegitimate connection, and this Ego, my daughter, that looks like I've got two daughters, but the way this thing is set up, it could also be that my daughter had a daughter without being married. It's not usually what that means, but anyway. Okay, so a kinship group is an economic group. That's who you share with. If you are in one of the controllers, then you're controlling and arranging and redistributing. So if one part of the kinship group had a really good year and the other one got wiped out with a flood, you don't get to hoard, you don't get to keep your stuff and buy a whole bunch of luxury goods. You don't get to go out and buy a 50-inch HD TV with your abundance. You have to share it with the folks who got wiped out by the flood, even though you told your cousin 15 times not to go farming down by the river. You still have to share. Okay. A kinship group enforces moral rules and punishes offenders. So instead of having police and a situation where somebody else is making the rules, somebody who doesn't know you is making the rules, you've got your cousin sitting down and saying, okay, now that was a really lousy thing that you did there, giving that big lavish wedding for one daughter and telling the other daughter, too bad, tough luck. We're not doing that in this clan. So cough it up, dude, etc. As well as we don't like the fact that you've been having sex with all the other husbands, and we're kicking you out of the family. Okay, because it's just too much disruption. We don't need the drama, just so you can have an ego. Okay, stuff like that. All right, now lineality is how kinship travels through the generations. Line, it comes from the Latin word for line. Okay, what line are you in? And this has a lot of implications for how much power women are going to have in the society, how much power men are going to have in the society, the forms of marriage, polygyny, polyandry, monogamy, or, something else. And one of the important things to remember here is that a society in which your kinship goes through your father, patrilineal, frequently is also patriarchal. Men have a preponderance of the power. Excuse me. Matrilineal societies aren't matriarchies. Women have power, and they may have equal power with men. Matrilineality. If you are a member of your mother's clan, not your father's, then your mother and her relatives, her brothers are who teach you what it means to be a man, right? It's your maternal uncles that you go to for guidance and for help and for etc. Okay. Rather than necessarily your father. Okay. So, in a patrilineal kinship structure, daughters are not, they may be emotionally loved, but they're being raised. A famous Hindu text said, your daughters, you're raising your daughters for another family, okay? Because they're going to join their husband's kinship group, okay? And if you combine that with the fact that a woman has to provide a dowry to her husband, which makes absolutely no sense, it should be bride price, but then you've got a tremendous incentive to kill your daughters, which is what has been happening in India. There's a serious sex imbalance looming, and because there aren't enough girls to make wives for all the boys that everybody's wants, sons. It's insane. It's short-term thinking. Short-term, everybody wants sons. But if everybody has sons, then no one's going to have grandchildren. So the culture is starting to change. Instead of a woman needing to provide a dowry to her husband, the husband is paying a bride price to his wife's family. So there's an incentive to raise your daughters, right? They are going to be your social security check when you are old. Right. And in the case of India, a lot of guys are going into Bangladesh, which, by the way, doesn't kill their daughters, and paying moms and dads, a bride price and smuggling their bride home. So, okay. Now, a bilineal kinship system is where you're a member of your mother's family and your father's family, right? And we think that that's what we're doing here in the US, right? And a lot of anthropologists have said, not really. You know, if you try to give your child anything other than your husband's name, everybody's like, oh my God, you must not really be married. Or, he's a wuss. He's not a man because his name isn't on his child. Maybe it's his acknowledgement that it's not his biological child. She must be a slut, right? Like, all of which, including the you're a woman and you're not changing your name to join your husband's family, right? Which, by the way, isn't a law. It's just a custom, right? Okay, that is not a reflection of bilineality. Okay, a lot of anthropologists would say this is a nominally, like in name only, bilineal, but men are more invested in their sons. They're more likely to pay child support if it's for a son than a daughter. They're more likely to stay married if they have a son rather than a daughter. On so many levels, boys matter. Sons matter because they're going to keep your name, right? They're members of your kinship group. Your daughters are going to join some other kinship group, which sounds a lot like patrilineal. It does. So, and most human cultures don't fit into any of these boxes. So these are just descriptive terms, okay? And then ambilineal, which is when you get married, you get to decide whether you want to join one kinship group or the other. You make a choice, and then you, okay. And an example of this in, modern culture, Pierre, was it Pierre Joliot? What's his name? It was Pierre. No, it wasn't Pierre. Anyway, the scientist, Joliot, who married Irene Curie, saw a situation where Pierre Curie was the last male Curie, and he had 2 daughters. And so Frederick, that's right, Frederick Joliot went to court and legally changed his name to hyphenate it to Frederick Joliot Curie, so that his wife would be hyphenated and all of his children would be hyphenated, and the Curie name would live on, right? Because it was only a man that could do that, right? Okay, so locality, right, is not the same as lineality. What it refers to is, when you get married, do you go live with your parents, or do you go live with your spouse's parents, or do you go off and create a home of your own? Right? And for the longest time, during farming days, the oldest son or the oldest daughter would inherit the family farm, and would live with the parents, and then the others would live in satellite buildings, right? Or would they buy some land nearby, right, so the family could stay together. So patrilocal means the man, patri, from patria, meaning your father. The man stays put, and the man inherits land, or the farm or whatever, and then imports a wife, right? So you're looking for a wife who has portable resources, sheep or whatever. And if you read the Bible, right, the man had was the lineage, right? And he imported a wife who brought with him as a dowry, 10 sheep or whatever, right? In other situations, the man would pay a bride price. He would buy his wife from his father-in-law. So give his father-in-law 10 sheep, which might become her marriage portion, or maybe your father-in-law would give his daughter 10 sheep to go with her. So the bride price plus the dowry together, that was her nest egg, which she brought to her husband. Okay, so if you stay put, you need a spouse who's got some kind of portable resources, all right? Now, most cultures, we think, were matrilineal, matrilocal, because it was women who did the horticulture. When the society transitioned to agriculture, both men and women did farm work, and then there were other chores involving animals and spinning things to make clothing and whatever. Okay. If you're in a situation where overpopulation has gotten you to the point where you're hemmed in by other clans, war and aggression are constant. Everybody's jockeying for limited resources, right? It's not a question of do we have good land to farm on. It's, do we have enough soldiers to protect ourselves from this constant war? Then men become more important. Not being killed by an enemy is more imminent than death by starvation. So what men do, is more important than what the women do, more crucial. Then you want the men to stay together in a kinship group, all right? So you want a man to stay with his father and his brothers because, you know, they've been practicing fighting together their whole life. They're going to, you know, they're going to be good at it, right? So if you got a patrilocal society, it's a sure bet you're either in agriculture or you're in pastoralism, and that warfare is a problem. All right. In a matrilocal society, woman stays put and she imports a husband. Okay. There's one of the states in India, Kerala, is matrilineal and matrilocal. So you know, your daughters are really important. Women have power in society. Women own the land, and they import husbands that have either skills to go out and get a job, you know, bring in money, or they've got some other resources that they're going to bring into the family pot. Okay. And then, and this is usually horticulture or small-scale agriculture. Okay. There we go. All right. Now, ambi means either. Okay. Ambidextrous means either hand. Ambilocal means that you can live with either family after marriage. So you can go live, if your in-laws are, you know, don't have any other kids, or they're in difficult health, and you might work it out with your brothers and sisters that you'll stay there and provide physical help, and the rest of them will send money, right? I mean, in modern times, that's what will happen, right? Somebody provides physical care, or somebody's, several people, and then right. And in indigenous cultures, you figure out which family needs you the most, or which family you can get along with more easily. It's like, if you really can't stand your mother-in-law, go live with the other family. So you can move back and forth as needs, as you know, the whole clan needs. Neolocal didn't used to be the norm. This is a very, very new phenomenon that started in the 20th century, with the people going to cities and getting jobs, right? And that instead of being out on the farm or the ranch or mining or whatever, you go to the city and you participate in, you know, some kind of skill for which you get paid. Okay. And you can up and leave town, you know, lose your job and get a job somewhere else. You can up and leave town and move somewhere else, right? Right. It's this freedom and flexibility does come at a cost, because human beings, our biology hasn't changed in 300,000 years. We still need community. We still need safety nets, and we need to be around people who love us. So, looking at the statistics, 60% of the cultures in the world are unilineal, okay? And this focuses on people who are doing subsistence with fixed resources, right? So if you're land-based, horticulture or agriculture, you're not going to up and run off, you know, because the land is here, you know? And the crops take a year to, you know, or 6 months to mature, right? So you're going to stay in one place. Also, pasturage, you know, you've got rights to certain pasturage. So if you've got animals, you're a pastoralist, a rancher, you're going to be unilineal, right? 45% of societies are patrilineal, meaning dad, right? You're a member of your dad's clan. So Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, And these cultures also tend to be severely male power dominated. Okay. 15% are matrilineal. Talked about Kerala, the Navajo, and the Hopi. The Iroquois, that was New York, Southern Ontario, Pennsylvania, and blah, blah, blah. That, some other Native American people of the plains, and some African cultures. Most of these folks are doing horticulture. The Minangkabau of Southeast Asia are a fun example. The women own the land, so there's matra clans. The older women control who does what and what goes on, and who you get to marry and who you don't. And what they're looking for is male marriage partners who've got some kind of something that they're going to bring to the clan. Okay, so a lot of the men get jobs. They start businesses. So they're running a business, making money, or they become soldiers, right? Get a salary, or get some other kind of salary, doing something, or they have a dowry of some animals, right? If you're in addition to doing horticulture, you also have animals. Some guy could be really good with pigs. He's a pig whisperer, and he brings, his mom and dad give him, 6 really good breeders as a dowry, and he's going to take over pig raising for the clan and boost production, and that's how he's going to make money for his wife's family. And 33% are bilineal of one sort or another. Okay, what do we know about lineality in history? A lot of ancient cultures were either patrilineal or matrilineal. The ancient Greek states, which were constantly fighting with each other, ding, 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 remember, aggression and war and men, were patrilineal. Some of Anatolia and the Middle East, some of the cultures were clearly matrilineal. And when they got taken over by one or another of the invading empires, switched to patrilineal. Okay, because an aggressive empire is going to be male-powered, male-dominated patriarchy, and that makes the flip to patrilineal, patrilocal inevitable. Some interesting DNA evidence about some Neanderthals. Some of the families, when there was a cave-in, and all the members of a family died, and they did DNA, and they discovered that the males, the men, were biologically related to each other, and the women were related to various of the children, but they were not related to the oldest adult male and the second oldest adult male. So he was probably the son of another wife who either died or was away from home that day. Whoop whoop. But it looks like a situation where one male had multiple wives, right? So that is polygyny, and probably, to the extent that anybody cared, you were a member of your father's clan. Okay, now I am going to zip through kinship systems because of time constraints. Okay, these various systems, very few of them are pure. Well, okay, the type, right? The Eskimo Inuit kinship system works this way, right? But a lot of other cultures might be, it could be exactly like this. It could be similar to it, but with modifications, okay? So one of the things about the Inuit kinship system, in the literature, it's Eskimo, there are unique terms within the nuclear family. So mother, father, brother, sister, right? And then broad definitions of aunt, uncle, cousin, right? This is the culture, this is the system that you are familiar with, right? Your aunt is your mother's sisters. It's also your father's sisters, and it's also the women who were married to your uncles, right? If your uncle is, you know, your mother's brother or your father's brother, the woman that married uncle is also aunt. So that covers a broad range of individuals. Okay, the Kalahari Kung and all the San people, the Bushmen, so-called, the Mongols had this kind of a system, and most of the bilineal, you know, mom's clan and dad's clan, use the Eskimo kinship system. Hawaiian kinship is the almost exact opposite. And it's very, very simple. All the females in your parents' generation, right, all the females are mother. So your aunts, your older female cousins, all the females in your parents' generation, they're all mother. All the males are father. All your brothers and your male cousins are brother. All the sisters and the female cousins are sister. Okay, and this works with ambilineal descent. So you can consider you can choose, right, which whatever's convenient at the moment, right, and 1/3 of the world's societies do this. That's a pretty huge percentage. Now, these days, these tend to be small societies, but there are some anthropologists who think that this was probably the ancestral kinship system of humanity back in, you know, East Africa, way back when. So, okay, what is that? There we go. Here we go. Navajo kinship, and remember this is matrilineal, matrilocal. Similar to Hawaiian. Remember, Hawaiian is the broadest possible. Okay. What the Navajo do is they've got something called your mother's clan is the clan you're born to. Born to them. Your father's clan is who you were born for. Okay. You can't marry any woman in your born to clan because every woman in your born to clan is your sister. Period. No exceptions. Bam. Now, if somebody is a 12th cousin 5 times removed, I'm sure the clan elders would make an exception. But, okay. You're born for clan, you love your father, you love all of his relatives, but you are not a member of that clan. So you can marry a woman in that clan, okay? As long as, again, that person is not a member of your mother's clan. Okay. Okay. And this is one of those situations where your avuncula, your mother's brothers, in the Navajo system, right? Because it's matrilineal, matrilocal. Guys have a lot of power in Navajo culture, right? But the people who are most important to you are your mother's brothers, not your father. You love your father, but that's not necessarily where you run to, and that's not the person who makes decisions about your life. Not to the extent that a father would in traditional American culture. Okay. The Sudanese is more complex. See all these different colors. The purple, the M and the N, same term. The turquoise, I and J, same term. K and L, same term. Okay. And so this one is very complex. You've got separate kinship terms for practically every option. Now, most cultures around the world, I'm going to be, ego. Yeah, ego's a man again. Darn it. This textbook that I got this from is not sexist, right? All right. So let me pretend that ego is actually a circle, all right? So there's my mom, the red blue, and she's got a sister. And there's a separate term for my mother's sister and my father's sister. My father's sister is F. My mother's sister is G. Separate kinship terms, right? And their children are different kinds of cousins, different kinship terms, okay? So, yeah, and I probably got you confused by saying K and L are the same. They're related to each other, but of course you're going to have a male term and a female term. Okay, right? So that's where they got that 8 different cousin terms from. And then your brother and sister. Okay, the Iroquois. This was what I was looking for. Excuse me. Okay, so the Iroquois. Remember, matrilineal and matrilocal. Okay, now, you call your paternal uncle, so dad's brothers, same sex, father. Maternal aunts are called mother. Your parallel cousins are brother and sister, but your cross cousins are not. Most cultures that care whether somebody is a cousin from your mother's side or your father's side, mother's sister versus mother's brother, right? In U.S. culture, we don't care. It's just cousins, right? And it's just aunt and uncle. But here, it matters. Most cultures, it matters. These kinship terms. A parallel cousin is family, parallel, right? They're parallel to your brothers and sisters, all right? Because it's the same sex as your parent, okay? So your mother's sister and your father's brother. Those are your parallel cousins. You usually cannot marry them, okay? You've got cousin marriages. It's always cross cousins. Okay, cross cousins are not in your your brothers and sisters. Okay, cross cousins are different sex, right? Your parent and their parent. Okay, so it's your father's sister and your mother's brother, right? And all the next kinship groups I'm going to show you, they're all about how cousins are defined, right? But in general, cross cousins versus parallel cousins, right? Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were cross cousins. Okay. The Crow kinship is very similar. You don't make distinctions among your father's kin. because they're not your kin, right? The Omaha is very similar to the Iroquois, except with the cousins, okay? And this is a situation where you don't care about your mother's cousins, your mother's lineage, because they're not yours, okay? The Igbo and the Dani do this. Okay, now I'm going to leave this as a thought experiment for you, all right? Ancient Rome, what kind of system did they use? Mater, mother, pater, father, and your mother's brother is your avunculus. Remember the English word avuncular? That's where that came from. Patruus is your father's brother, right? And soror and frater, does that sound familiar? And then filia and filius, right? Filial piety, yeah. And then fraterellus is your brother's son, and sobrinus is sobor and soror are related, so it's your sister's daughter. Okay, anyway, I'm going to leave this for you. Actually, let's make this fun. How about if you email me with the answer, what kind of system did Marcus Aurelius use from these types? I will gift you with a prize, either some free consulting time, and I'm not talking about a sales pitch. I mean some real free consulting time, or a free book because I'm an author. Okay, how's that? All right, here's another fun thing for you. The Old English before the Norman conquest. Modor and Fedor, right? Mother and father. Swestor and Brodor, right? Dotor and Sunu. Nepha and Nift, right? And in this case, nephew and niece are the same regardless of whether they are through your brother or your sister. Okay, so figure out what kind of a system this is without Googling it, please. I mean, come on. Strain your brain. It's more fun that way. All right, so adoption, another way to get kinship. You can either have it formalized by law. You can, what our ancestors did is they took in orphaned kin. So you were with your aunt, your uncle, your second cousin, you know. It allows you to acquire the sex child that you need for whatever reason. You need a daughter, you need a son, and also acquire the skills that you need. You can get adopt an adult son or daughter who's, you know, a fabulous blacksmith, and, you know, and you've got somebody to leave your smithy to. You know, it's, you know, Smith and Son. Oh, okay. And then there was fostering, which was done all around the world. Okay. You had groups of young men learn together. Excuse me. Young men were fostered to become knights in Anglo-Saxon England. Excuse me, that was more the noble families in Europe, sort of medieval times. Yeah. Anglo-Saxon, you took on somebody, you fostered somebody to learn a skill. You know, it's kind of like an apprenticeship. But you had a lifelong connection to your foster mother, foster father. Okay. And then, of course, kinship through marriage. Okay. Whether or not you get any real kinship benefits depends on what kind of a power situation, right, you're in. If your wife is this powerless drudge, she hasn't got any power within her family of marriage, you probably are not making big points with your father-in-law by treating your wife that way. So, you know, you're not going to Yeah. A lot of marriages are made for economic advantage, right? And a lot of these marriages, for some purpose other than love, grew into love. Muhammad married a widow, an affluent widow who was older than him, because he was a really good businessman. He was a camel whisperer, and he was very good at doing the deals, right? Traveling and doing these great deals. She wanted to get richer. She wanted somebody who could do that, who would do that and wouldn't cheat her. And he was an honest man. He had a reputation for being an honest trader. So she got business advantages. He got business advantages because now he's the husband of somebody who's affluent. He's living in better circumstances. And they grew to one of the great love stories of all time. And then this happened, hundreds of times, thousands of times, millions of times. Before the whole ideology of, passion and lust and all that stuff got started. Okay, and a lot of it has to do with where's the couple live, right? You're going to be more connected to whatever family you live with, unless, your in-laws are living right next door. So I am going to stop now, and we are going to discuss marriage in the next episode of Anthro is Fun, Part 5. So stay tuned, and remember, Victoria at soaringdragon.biz. And I was not kidding. You will have a prize if you get those 2 kinship questions correct. In fact, I'll give you some kind of a prize, even if you're wrong, just for trying. Okay? Take care.